Good morning. I hope everyone's had a great weekend. I want to welcome you here to Conestoga's Bloom restaurant on our Waterloo campus. We've been cooking here for about 5 years now in the new building and happy as ever to be here. I want to welcome you here today to do a new dish on our menu, a seared duck breast with a carrot risotto. We're going to head over here to our stove. Pretty much any restaurant station and any commercial kitchen is going to have some variation of these things. Of course, your stove, your oven, but seasonings, tools, and different components to build your dishes quickly and continuously. Okay? Different than from how we do things at home, tends to be a little bit more start to finish. Line cooks are always setting up to do things over and over and over again. Okay? So there's two major components to this dish. First, there's our seared duck breast, and second, there's the risotto itself. Okay? So over here at King Shook, I'm going to ask to take a couple of duck breasts out of the thermal circulator. Okay. A new pair of tongs there. You got it? All right. So this a tool, it's called an immersion circulator, or some people might call it a sous vide. A sous vide just means under pressure, and that's the reference to the fact that the food is vacuum packed, and then it's cooked at a very precise temperature. So we're cooking it to 50 degrees Celsius, which is sort of comes in about a rare. For the duck breast. Now, duck breast, it being a working muscle, can lend itself to being a little bit tough. So we're cooking it to rare in the circulator, and then we're bringing it up to about a mid-rare, where it's really at its best in cast iron. Okay, to do that, we'll grab a seasoning tray. We'll remove our duck breasts from the bag. Okay, now duck breast is really at its best when we can get the skin nice and crispy. Sort of medium rare, medium, that's the best color. But with that fatty skin on top, we also want to render that as best we can and make sure we've got something really crispy and beautiful. Okay, we're going to season it really simply. We've got a little bit of salt. Okay, a little bit of pepper. Okay, and we're going to season both sides. Okay, as you can see, there's a little dry rub on the bottom, a little bit of anise, coriander, orange zest, and I'm just going to reinforce that seasoning a little bit. Okay, and then over here, we've got a cast iron pan. This has just been on a low heat. And the trick with duck is to go low and slow. Again, that muscle itself is a working muscle. We don't want to cook it too much. We certainly don't want to overcook it, or it'll be quite dry and tough. But the skin is quite fatty, quite thick and fatty. So as low and slow as possible, we want to render that skin and crisp that skin so we have a really, really beautiful product to work with. As we're doing that, we can think about setting up for our risotto. And maybe I'll welcome Sandeep over here, who's going to join us. He's one of our first-year culinary students. Okay, and we got 2 duck breasts here. We're going to work 2 portions of risotto. I'll do one. You can do one. Together we'll learn, all right? So again, different than from how you might cook at home. Typically in restaurants, you would par cook risotto. So you're going to cook it about 75% of the way, making sure certainly not to bring it anywhere close to fully done. Because risotto depends on having a little bit of bite, a little bit of texture to it to really be authentic to what the dish is. This has been par cooked with a mixture of a vegetable stock and also carrot juice to reinforce that carrot flavor. And then to reinforce it a little further, we've made a puree here with carrot and fennel and a few other aromatics. And that's going to reinforce flavor. It's also going to reinforce color. Okay, recognizing that we need to finish cooking this that last 20-25% of the way. We're going to start with a little bit of stock. And this is really a best practice with risotto, is we are going to start with a little bit of stock, just enough to kind of cover the rice. Okay? But we're not going to add too much too soon. It's kind of like going to the barber, right? You can always take a little bit more, can't put anything back, right? So we don't want to overwhelm the pot with stock, or we might end up with a product that's too wet or too overcooked by the time it's prepared. Okay? Before we get into that, we want to just take a look at our duck breasts. Okay? See, we're starting to get some golden color on that. Okay? One side more than the other. Certainly you observe that. Just go ahead and move those pieces of duck around, okay, and try to even those out by the time they're both resting. Okay? So we're going to give those about 2 more minutes. And while we do that, perhaps I can ask Dola to work with me on setting up the garnish for the end of the dish. Okay, so we've got a small slaw we're going to prepare. Okay, this is shaved fennel. Okay, there's lots of that anise flavor in the dish. There's a little bit of it in the carrot puree. There's a little in the carrot stock that we're using to make the risotto. The tarragon that we use to finish it. So we're really layering that throughout the dish. Okay. Here we're going to take 4 basic items. We've got some chiffonade parsley, really fine threads of parsley, some very thinly shaved shallots for a little bit of piquancy, the fennel, and these are watermelon radishes. So this is a radish, appears green on the outside and pink on the inside, kind of like watermelon, that are a really fun local ingredient to play with in the spring and summertime. Okay. So these are set. We're going to add just a little bit of salt and pepper. And then, Dola, when you have a minute, I might ask you to just grab that squeeze bottle of the lemon vinaigrette. I think that's the one thing we might still be missing from our station setup. Turning back to the duck over here. Okay, now we're starting to see that deeper golden brown. That's really what we're looking for. Okay. Now the underside of this duck is still a little undercooked. So we're just going to flip it over. We'll give it about 1 minute in the pan, and then we'll just turn it off and kind of let it coast. That'll serve to kind of rest the muscle and slowly finish cooking it through as well. Okay. So that'll be about it. We're just going to push it to the back of the stove here. Okay, now we can welcome Sandeep back, and we'll both make our risottos together. Okay, so as we go here, we're going to make sure we just have just enough stock to cover our rice. Okay, towards the very end, we might want to see a little bit less volume of liquid in the pan, but for right now, to get it going, we're going to do just enough to cover that rice. Okay, as we go too, we can add a pinch of salt, knowing that we want to kind of layer the seasoning in. Okay, it can be a little overwhelming to get to the end of a dish that hasn't been seasoned at all, and try to take that from 0 to 100%. All in one shot. It can kind of overwhelm the palate. So as we're going, of course, with fairly experienced hands between the two of us, we expect approximately a certain amount. So we'll kind of layer that in and taste as we go, and then just be able to make those fine-tuning adjustments at the very, very end. Okay, so here we go. It's starting to simmer now. You can see already starting to tighten up just a little bit. I think Sandeep's is just a little bit looser than mine, but we both could use a little bit. Now, if you were preparing this at home, this part of the process would be maybe, think of this as 15 minutes into cooking your risotto. You've sweat your shallots, you've toasted your rice, you've deglazed with your wine, you've made small additions of stock, and you've stirred and you've stirred and you've stirred. Okay? And now we're at the point where that's almost complete, so we're starting to add our seasonings, starting to add the things that we're finishing it with. Okay, so as we come up to a simmer here, we're going to add a little bit of butter to start out. Okay, good generous cube. Okay, I always kind of joke with the students here that risotto is certainly a rich dish, right? And sometimes young cooks can be quite shocked by the amount of butter and Parmesan cheese that goes into a risotto. I always say if you don't feel like you haven't used too much, you probably haven't used enough. Okay, so we've got some smoked carrots they're adding here, a few sugar snap peas, just some nice seasonal vegetables. Kind of balance the dish. And we're going to stir and stir and stir and melt that butter. Not just melt, but also emulsify, okay? We've got that water in there and the starch from the rice. And as we stir, that butter is going to form a creamy emulsion between the stock and itself, and that's going to give us a beautiful texture on the palate. And I'm at this point starting to see that butter to kind of disappear. So I know I'm quite close to being able to finish this off. And for one portion of risotto, we've got very finely shaved Parmesan cheese here. We're going to do 2 good handfuls. 1, 2 good handfuls. And at this point, you can even pull it off the heat or just turn the heat off for a brief second. And we don't want to cook it too long with the cheese in there. Something you'll notice, if you're looking carefully, is that all of a sudden the texture is much stiffer. Okay, that cheese has really brought, almost acted like glue. It's really brought that risotto together, and it's lost a little bit of that fluidity. One of the best tests for risotto is that it shouldn't really be able to hold a shape. Shouldn't be soup either, right? But we got to find that sort of semi-fluid state for it to live in. Now, as I drag my spoon through this pan, I can see that it's stiffened up a little bit too much. So I'm just going to use a little bit of vegetable stock to let that out. Sandeep, what do you think of yours? Yeah, maybe just a little bit, right? Okay, again, we've got hot stock, we've got hot rice here, so we're able to just turn the heat off. We don't want to risk overcooking the risotto at this point, because we've done such a good job this far, or so far, it would be a real shame to go over. And how are we doing here? Yeah, and we'll compare that to this one. Okay, so if you notice kind of the difference between the two of these, this sort of slowly fills back in. Okay, this one maybe just a little bit stiffer, although I would still say, you know, that's nicely within the range. Okay, so we're going to take our duck breasts, we're going to take our risotto, and we're going to head up and meet Dola on Expo Station. Okay, and any kitchen expo is the station that serves as the finisher of dishes, and certainly the last line of defense in terms of quality check to make sure the cooks have done their jobs very, very well. Okay, so we're going to move over this way. Okay, and Sandeep and Dola are going to transfer these risottos into the bowl. And could you get me a flash tray with a little paper towel on it, please? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, over here, we've just cut that duck breast on a slight bias, and we're going to fan it out on the dish in just a minute here. And these details, when we think about restaurant cooking, are important because, of course, customers are going to assess the quality of your work with their eyes before their palates. Okay. As I always train our cooks here in the restaurant, we want to kind of arrange things on our platter the way we want to see them on the plate, making it just smoother and easier to transfer. And 1. And 2, and we'll just finish it with that slaw right in the middle. It's just being dressed with a really simple lemon vinaigrette, salt and pepper. Okay, that lemon vinaigrette gives it a nice little punch of acidity, which of course is not just beautiful for the slaw itself, but also provides some balance to the dish. And we've got a fairly rich dish, lots of cheese and butter, fatty duck. Okay, so some acidity helps kind of cut through that and bring some balance to the plate. Okay, and there we go. We got 2 portions of our pan-roasted duck breast and carrot risotto with a fennel slaw. I hope you like it, and we'll see you next time.